Hi, it's Leanna Merrick, and you're watching episode 5 of the Modern Girl's Guide to Sewing. Are you ready to start sewing?
It's finally time!
Finally,
Yay!
right? The best way to learn your machine is just by getting on it and sewing. In this video, we're going to show you 4 of the basic stitches we use all the time, as well as how to make a buttonhole since that's super important.
First, we'll start with the basic straight stitch.
When you start sewing a seam, you need to always backstitch or backtack. This is 2 or 3 reverse stitches that lock your seam and keep it from unraveling. Start your seam by doing 3 or 4 forward stitches, like this, and then hold down your reverse button here and backstitch 2 or 3 stitches directly on top of the previous stitches. Now let go of the reverse button and continue forward with your seam.
One of the most common things that we hear is that people can't sew a straight line. Well, good news! The machine helps you out with that. On your needle plate, directly below your needle, you'll see these lines with some measurements on them. These are used as guides to keep your seam straight and to measure your seam allowance. A traditional seam allowance that you'll see on store-bought patterns is 5/8 of an inch, but we typically use 1/2 an inch because it makes the math easier. You can use whatever works for you. As you sew, keep the edge of your fabric lined up with the measurement line of your choice. And if you keep it lined up the entire time, you'll have a straight line. An easy trick is to watch the edge of your fabric instead of watching your needle as you sew. Now with straight seams, you can make your stitches super wide or super short depending on your project, material, and preference. In episode number 3, the basics of your sewing machine, we talked about the part of your machine that changes your stitch width. This machine's is right here, and I can change it as low as 1 or as high as 5. Our computerized machines automatically set to 2.2, which is a standard stitch length. On your mechanical machines, set it between 2 and 2.5. The next stitch is a basting stitch, which is a stitch using the widest stitch width, in this case 5. Because of the super wide width of the stitch, it's not very strong and can break easily. So it's only used as a temporary stitch to hold your fabric in place until you do a regular seam. It's typically used for gathering, which we'll show you later on in this course.
Another common stitch is the zigzag stitch, which is a simple back and forth stitch. With this stitch, you can also change the size of your zigzag to be super close together or super wide apart. Before I had a serger, I finished all of my seam allowances with a zigzag stitch, since if you don't finish those raw edges, your woven fabrics will fray. You'll hear us recommend this method on our blogs all the time since a lot of beginners don't have sergers. When you're finishing those raw edges, you'll do what my sewing teacher always called zig on, zag off, meaning one stitch will be on the edge of the fabric and the other stitch will just barely be off the edge of the fabric, so it kind of tucks the raw edge in and keeps it secure and from unraveling.
One last straight stitch option is a stretch stitch. It's kind of like a zigzag stitch, but the stitches run up and down rather than side to side, overlapping each other like this. It's used on knit fabrics to allow some stretch. We never use this kind of stitch because we feel like it looks a little messy, but it is an option that comes on most machines. A hemming stitch that we use all the time is a blind hem stitch. This one is really great for solid fabrics that don't hide your seams as well as pattern fabrics, or if you just want to have a really clean and smooth hem on your project. Serge or zigzag stitch along the edge of your fabric and pin your hem as normal. Then lay it on your machine with the folded hem face up. Now fold your hem under, but leave it about 1/4 of an inch sticking out like this. The stitch is going to do a straight seam along this revealed edge. Then, every few stitches, it will do one zigzag stitch and catch on the very edge of your fabric here. You don't want any of those straight stitches to be sewn on the main part of your fabric, only the very tip of the zigzag. It's up to you to make sure that the right stitches go on the right parts of the fabric, so take this one really slowly. We still do them slowly too. When you're done, it will look like this on the right side of your project.
And finally, a buttonhole stitch. Attach your buttonhole foot to the shank right here and then place your button in this section at the back. You can move the slider depending on the size of your button. Then pull this lever on the left side of your needle down and match it up with a little square on the side of the foot so your machine knows how big to make your buttonhole. Before adding a buttonhole, it's a good idea to mark where you want your buttonhole, because once it's under this giant foot, it can be hard to tell exactly where you're sewing. We also recommend doing a test buttonhole before you sew on your actual fabric. Place your fabric under the foot, lining up your needle with the starting mark you made. Now bring your presser foot down, press on your pedal, and the machine will do the rest. Once it's done, use a seam ripper and cut out the center of the buttonhole.
Did you make it? Congratulations! We're halfway through now, and now it's time to get into the really fun stuff. Halfway through dance party. Woo!